Good afternoon, and thank you for standing by. I'd like to inform all participants that your lines have been placed on a listen-only mode until the question and answer session of today's call. Today's call is also being recorded. If anyone has any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn the call over to Linda Lee. Thank you. You may begin.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Linda Lee, and thank you for attending today's webinar. I want to welcome everyone to our webinar series on exploring census data. If you have been following our series, we began in April with the first in the series on international trade, followed by a second in the series on employment. For anyone who may have missed a session, we have our presentations, recordings, and transcripts archived on our site census.gov, found under Recorded Webinars. Third in the series today is on census data and data tools available for emergency management. In this webinar, our speakers will dive into our demographic and economic program data to help you obtain information for when a disaster strikes. Today's webinar will be presented by Ms. Amanda Klimek, who is a statistician from our American Community Survey program. Our second speaker today is Mr. Chip Walker, who is one of our subject matter experts on emergency management statistics. In a moment, Amanda and Chip will be presenting practical ways to use census data to help in the recovery efforts in the aftermath of a disaster. Our speakers will also be showing you how to obtain the data using the available tools. Before we begin, let me give you a quick look into our series. The Exploring Census Data webinar series consists of 6 webinars presented monthly on popular topics. On the right side of the screen, we have included upcoming topics and session dates. Other items consistent throughout the series is the use of real-life case scenarios to illustrate practical ways to use the data. Each of the webinars in the series is presented by subject matter experts with the opportunity for Q&A at the end of each session. And if you missed a webinar, want to refer a colleague to a session you found to be helpful, or simply would like to view it again, each of the sessions is recorded and posted at the link provided here. Archived for you as well is our 2018 series, where you will be able to obtain the slides, transcripts, and recordings. So let's begin with general information about the Census Bureau. The Census Bureau is the federal government's largest statistical agency. We conduct over 100 surveys each year with some of our highly visible programs such as the Decennial, the American Community Survey, the Economic Census listed here. Out of these 100-plus surveys, over 60 of them collect business data. Now, when it comes to our data, a pyramid is a good illustration of the relationship between details and timeliness. In general, the more timely the data, the less details. With that being said, the Economic Census is a periodic survey that takes place every 5 years. It is illustrated at the bottom of the pyramid because it is the most comprehensive program when you're looking for business data. On the next slide, I'm going to briefly provide a general overview of our decennial census. The primary purpose of the 2020 decennial census is to collect data on population and housing, but there are many other important purposes. The data from the 2020 helps with drawing congressional and state legislative districts, school districts, and voting precincts, distributing billions of dollars annually in funding to states and local communities. These outcomes affect every person in the United States, which is why it is important that we have a complete and accurate census. Since the 2020 will touch our lives in the near future, here's a timeline of our activities so you can see what's coming down the road. In March of next year, households will be receiving an invitation to participate and respond. As you can see from the timeline, reminders will be delivered to those who may have missed the initial mailings. Every household will have the option of responding online, by phone, or by mail. So what can you do to get involved to help make the 2020 census a complete and accurate count of the nation's people? You can actively support and spread the word about completing your 2020 census in your community. You can learn about more than approximately 500,000 temporary census jobs that may come available in the spring of 2020. You can remind others that census is important, easy, and safe. And lastly, You can join your local Complete Count committee and lend your expertise to ensure all areas of your community are accurately counted in 2020. And at this point, I would like to turn the presentation over to Amanda, who will begin today's webinar on emergency management.
Thanks, Linda. Good afternoon. My name is Amanda Klimek, and I'm from the American Community Survey Office's Outreach and Education Branch. Today, we're going to focus on how you can use American Community Survey data from various sources from the Census Bureau for emergency management. We're going to cover the depth and breadth of sources and topics that we author. And we're going to show you data tools that make it easy and intuitive to access these data. This includes tools specifically designed for emergency management, such as On the Map for Emergency Management, and also Census Business Builder. You can use the data that you learn about today at all levels of emergency management. The first level, preparedness, goes into simulating what might happen in what-if disaster scenarios to plan response efforts. The second level, response, prioritizes these efforts in the event of an emergency. The third level, recovery, analyzes the impacts that these efforts have had in implementing recovery solutions. You'll notice that all three of these include identifying who is affected in these emergencies. The data that we offer provides critical insights into answering this question at the most granular levels of geography. So we're going to start with the American Community Survey, or ACS, which is the nation's most current, reliable, and accessible data source for local statistics on critical planning topics such as age, children, veterans, commuting, education, income, and employment. The survey samples approximately 3.5 million addresses, which are collected continuously throughout the year to provide annual social, economic, housing, and demographic estimates. The survey helps to distribute more than $675 billion of federal funding each year and covers more than 40 topics. It supports more than 300 known federal uses and countless non-federal uses. Businesses and communities use these 11 billion estimates each year to make vital decisions, including where to locate hospitals and schools, what transportation needs exist, and what goods and services businesses should provide to customers. We release 3 different sets of these estimates each year. The one-year estimates are collected over 1 calendar year and include geographies with populations above 65,000. The one-year supplemental estimates are, as the name implies, supplemental estimates to the 1 year based on the most popular tables, and these include geographies with population above 20,000. The 5-year estimates cover a period of 60 months, or 5 years, and include the more granular levels of geography such as census tracts and block groups. This makes the ACS such a great resource for emergency management. These small levels of geography can be combined to approximate the areas affected by a disaster. So that way we can get a clearer picture of the characteristics of that area. If you look on the blue bar to the right, I've included real estimates from our 2017 5-year data. From these 4 broad categories that I mentioned earlier, you can see how we have very specific topics that are directly related to information you might want to know about your community in a disaster scenario. So for the ACS portion of this webinar, we'll start by going over some of the basics to get you familiar with the ACS, and we'll then move on to how you can use ACS data in the field of emergency management, where we will look at a real-life scenario where ACS data was used for a disaster evacuation program, and I will show you how to find the data that they used. Finally, we'll leave you with some ways you can reach out for help with the survey and how to get involved in the ACS community. As I talked about earlier a little bit, the content collected by the ACS can be grouped into these 4 main areas. Here we can get a little more into the detail on the kind of information we can get from these areas, especially in regards to emergency management. If we start on the left with social characteristics, you might notice that disability status and language are generally particularly useful characteristics of an area to consider when it comes to emergency planning and response. You can use this data to quickly determine what kind of evacuation assistance people might need based on these considerations. If you go into the middle, you might see the basic demographic characteristics such as age, Hispanic origin, race, relationships, and sex, and you might notice that that is the same information collected on the decennial census. It's important to consider these basic demographics of who is affected by a disaster. For example, you might want to know how much of the affected population is elderly, or determine the racial distribution of a community, and you can combine these demographics with the other topics we've discussed. Below that, the economic characteristics can give us information on poverty status, those on public assistance, and the different types of industries of workers who live in the community to determine the economic vulnerabilities. Finally, over on the far right, we can take a look at the housing stock. How old is the housing stock, and what types of heating fuel are people using in these areas? These would all be good things to know in an emergency. And later, we'll actually look at an example that specifically focuses on the topic of vehicles available in a household. Here on this slide, you can see the different levels of geography that we offer. The ACS provides data for more geographies on an annual basis than any other household survey. The great thing about this slide is that we can see how the different levels of geography interact with one another. This is helpful if you'd like to combine these geographies like we talked about earlier to approximate an affected area in an emergency. Lower geographic areas fit neatly within the larger areas connected directly with lines. For example, congressional districts, school districts, and places, which we consider cities, towns, and other municipalities, fit neatly within states and don't cross state boundaries. However, they may cross boundaries of counties or other metropolitan areas since they're not directly connected. So now that we've gotten started with the logistics of the survey, we can take a look at how we apply these data to real-life emergency management situations and response. On this slide, we have a real-life example of ACS data in action in emergency management planning. In the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, the organization Evacuteer worked with the City of New Orleans Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness Office to use ACS data to plan the location of 17 evacuation points throughout the City of New Orleans. These evacuation points, called EvacuSpots, are designed to evacuate 40,000 people within 36 hours. EvacuSpot locations are marked throughout the City of New Orleans with these statues shown in the image. These spots reach populations in need by measuring social vulnerability in census tracts and topics such as access to public transportation, vehicle availability, disability status, age, language, poverty status, and educational attainment. These are all topics that are free and available online through the ACS. You might know already that one of our primary dissemination methods for our data is in the American Community Survey, the American Fact Finder. And you might have also heard that there will be no new releases in American Fact Finder after this month. So that will bring us to data.census.gov, which will from now on be our primary method of dissemination. With that in mind, I'd like to give you a demo of data.census.gov to figure out how to find the same data that Evacuteer used. And to start this demo, we need a topic and a geography. So we're going to start by looking at the number of households with no vehicles available as an example, because when planning for evacuations, it's obviously very important to look at how many households lack access to a vehicle and where they are located. In terms of geography, we're going to take a look at Louisiana, and we're going to take a look at the coastal parishes, which in Louisiana means is the county equivalent. And Evacuteer used census tracts for this, but census tract functionality will be more sophisticated later this year after the one-year data release, so we are going to take a look at the parishes for today. So we're going to start by going to data.census.gov, and we're going to put in our topic, and we're going to put in Orleans Parish. We'll start with that. And this will bring us to a list of different tables, and you can either click on the table you want to bring you to the full list, or you can click View All Tables. So we're going to go ahead and do that. This brings us to our table, and you can see some information about the table up in the top. You can see the year and the data set it's from. We talked a little bit about the 1-year versus 5-year data sets earlier. But we want to look at something that shows us more clearly the number of vehicles in the household. So this looks like it could get us closer to that. And you'll see here we do have an estimate for no vehicles available. But if you look up in the table information here, we see that that is no vehicles available for workers 16 years and older living in households. So we're going to try another one. Let's take a look at this table right here. And you'll see that compared to the roughly 16,000 earlier, this estimate's a little different. And we see that the universe is households. So this does in fact tell us that this is the number of households that have no vehicles available to them in Orleans Parish. We can go up here and look at Customize Table to see some more options. And this is the really powerful part about data.census.gov is it really has this custom functionality available, and it's pretty intuitive to use. So here you can look at different things. You can change geographies. You can add multiple geographies. You can change the year, and you can change between the 1-year and 5-year data sets, like we talked about earlier, to see more granular levels of geography. We're going to go ahead and do that right now. We're also going to play with adding in another geography. So let's go ahead and try to add in another parish from Louisiana. And I know that Jefferson Parish in Louisiana was heavily affected during Hurricane Katrina. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at that. We're going to do this. We're going to try mapping this. So we're going to go back to the tables here. And we're going to see if we can map this real quick. So the mapping feature is going to be another powerful feature of data.census.gov. So let's scroll into Louisiana here. And you can see at first that we don't see our county on there. We were looking at parishes, so we're going to look at the county view here. We see that our 5-year estimates data set is already in, and we need to add in our no vehicles available estimate. So then we see Orleans Parish here, and that is the concentration of people with, or households with no vehicles available. And you can select more counties or parishes in a couple of different ways. We're going to try the selection tool right here, and say we want to look at the coastline. We're just going to drag this along the coastline. And now we can get kind of a clearer view of the picture of the concentrations of households with no vehicles available in the coastline and where they're located. But say we want to also look at Lake Pontchartrain right here, which also might be affected by an incoming storm surge. We can also click on individual counties or parishes and add them to our analysis. So you'll see here that we have a legend that shows us these concentrations. And if you go back to the tables capability, you can see that all of our new additions have already been added in for us. If you're interested, you can go in and you can try to download this data set. And you can download it for multiple years, and you can download it for the 1-year and 5-year. And it right now will be available in a CSV file, which will come in a zip file. So we're going to go back to our PowerPoint. And finally, we invite you to stay in touch with the American Community Survey. You can sign up for and manage alerts on ACS news and events such as conferences and webinars via GovDelivery, visit our website, or connect with us on social media using the hashtag ACS Data. For support, you can reach out to us at aco.users.support@census.gov. If you end up using ACS Data for any cool emergency management uses or otherwise, make sure to source us. It helps people figure out where they can get the detailed information we are giving you today. And on that note, if you do end up using ACS Data to create real outcomes in your community, we want to hear about it through our Share Your Story feature. That way we can share it with others, just like we did today, to show people how important the data is and how you can find new and interesting ways to use it. For the next portion of our webinar, we'll move on to a free tool that the Census Bureau provides called On the Map for Emergency Management. With this tool, you can view disasters in real time along with the demographic and socioeconomic profiles of the areas affected. This includes historical archives of previous disasters with the same information in a searchable format. It's a great resource to assist in evaluating the impact of potentially affected areas or to learn from the history of a disaster. This features a diversity of data sets so we can learn about the physical, economic, and social vulnerabilities of an area that is affected. It helps us answer questions such as, where should response efforts concentrate? And are there special or vulnerable population segments that we can help? We'll learn a little bit more about this tool, and we'll end with another demo exploring the ongoing floods in the Midwest. So this tool automatically incorporates real-time data from the National Weather Service at NOAA, the Department of the Interior, U.S. Department of Agriculture, and FEMA. We'll take a look at this information supplied by these agencies when we take a look at the real-time usage of the tool. This tool is used by emergency management professionals, transportation planners, local government officials, media, and more. There are 3 data sets included on the map for emergency management, which includes the 2010 decennial census, the ACS, which we just learned about, and the loads data set. We've discussed the first 2 in this webinar a little bit, but I'd like to give you some background on the loads data set. Loads data helps provide us information on workers in the area, such as their earnings, age, and education, as well as the industries they work for. The LEHD program uniquely links employers to their employees for the United States, which is what makes this data set so useful for analyzing this type of data. With this tool, you can quickly access workforce and resident impacts by identifying the number and location of affected workers, examining workforce demographics, identifying affected industries, and visualizing where affected workers live. And you can also assess population and housing impacts by identifying the number and location of affected residents, examining population demographics of affected areas, and identifying vulnerable population groups. You can also examine the housing characteristics of affected areas. So this screenshot was taken yesterday, June 4th, with real-time information. And I'll go through what all the little indicators mean, starting with what we can't see right now. Not currently showing is a green wind swath, which indicates hurricanes, which is provided by NOAA's National Hurricane Center. We also don't see any pink snowflakes on the map right now, which would indicate snowfall, but this information is also supplied by NOAA. Yellow houses indicate a flood, also supplied by NOAA, and you'll see we do have quite a bit of that right now. Orange lifesavers, or anything orange, indicates a FEMA disaster declaration area. Red flames indicate wildfires, which is information supplied by the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Interior. And to the left is a list of current events. And you can access the event you're interested in by either clicking on the map or clicking on the list to the left. You can also use a search bar to search the historical event archive. The historical event archive is a powerful feature of this tool. Some of you might remember Hurricane Michael last year in 2018, and some facts on that: it was the 3rd most intense Atlantic hurricane to make landfall in the United States in terms of pressure. It was the strongest in terms of maximum wind speed to strike the U.S. since Andrew in 1992, and it was the strongest on record in the Florida Panhandle and the 4th strongest landfalling hurricane in the U.S. During this storm, you could follow Hurricane Michael on the map for emergency management as it traveled up the coast from the Gulf to Virginia. And you could view not only the history of the impact, but the probability of future impact. Since then, we have been able to see a snapshot of the affected regions saved in this archive. So we can learn from the storm and continue with the relief efforts in the months that followed. This information could be crucial not just for the immediate response to the storm, but in terms of applying for relief grants or planning for similar disasters in the future. For now, we're going to head back to the present and take a look at the ongoing Mississippi River floods. Okay, so you can see here, it doesn't look much different from the screenshot I showed you earlier. We're going to go ahead and select one of these areas, and we'll go ahead and select the flood area here. And we're going to go ahead and zoom in a little bit. It'll take a bit for it to render here. But you can see that there are 3 million people living in the affected area. About 2.5 million of those are in family households, and about 500,000 of those are in non-family households. This is reflected here in this bar chart, and it's also reflected on the map that shows you the concentrations of these areas. We can take a look at some of the topics that we looked at earlier. We can take a look at the population 65 years old or living alone. And if we click on one of these tables, you'll see that it changes everything that we're looking at. So the bar graph is reflected. There's only one category in this table, so the bar graph is reflecting that, but you can also see that it changed the concentration here, and you can see where this population that you're interested in is living. And we can take a look at all these socioeconomic characteristics, but also something that might be interesting to look at and something that has more categories that we could explore is the age of the housing stock with the year built. And you'll see this pulls up more of these bars in the bar chart. So you see we do have quite a bit of older housing stock, especially here we have quite a few houses built 1939 or earlier. And you can either click in the table to help that reflect in the map, or you can click on the bar chart to change that. And so here we can see where that concentration of older houses is located. If we want to go ahead and look at that employment data that we mentioned from the loads data set, we'll look at employed in the event area, which we can filter through the topic section here. And by default, it shows us the characteristics of the workforce in terms of age, the age breakdown. But something I think would be really interesting to look at is what industries are affected. So we're going to go down here and look at the industry sector. And we're going to go ahead and click on this table. And you can see that healthcare and social assistance, manufacturing, and retail trade are some of the most heavily populated industries in terms of the workforce in this area. We can take a look at these on the map and see where these concentrations are. And you can tell that the difference between the first and second most heavily populated industry, the healthcare industry, is a little more dispersed than the manufacturing industry, which seems to make sense, as manufacturing workers might need to live near a factory or a plant, whereas healthcare and social assistance workers might be a little more dispersed where they're needed. But it's really great to be able to see this on the map in an area that's affected. And if you find something interesting, you can either export it through a CSV file, KML, or you can share it as a link. Okay, at this point, I would like to hand the presentation over to Chip Walker. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining our webinar. Again, my name is Chip Walker, and I'm the co-lead of the Census Bureau's Emergency Preparedness and Response Team. And our goal is to provide as much Census Bureau data as possible, either before, during, or after some type of emergency, to help those people in the emergency management business, be it federal, state, local, or even the public, understand as much data that we have about the people and the businesses impacted. So what I'm going to show you today is a tool. You'll see it right on the screen now. It's called Census Business Builder, the Regional Analyst Edition. And this is the splash screen. We're going to teach you how to build a region quickly, how to analyze the data that you're looking at on the screen, how to look at different geographies or sectors, and even how to go about filtering in a certain desired variable if you want to see areas that are high or low. We're going to show you the reports that contain all the information and how you can download the reports or print them out if you need them. And now what I'm going to show you is a live demo of Census Business Builder. So what you're looking at now is the home page of census.gov, and this is where you would start before you to go find Census Business Builder. And what you want to do is you want to go into Explore Data. You're going to go down to Data, Apps, and Tools. And then here you have a list of our tools, and you're just going to simply scroll down until you see Census Business Builder right here. And this is going to take you to the Census Business Builder homepage. Now, this homepage has a number of different resources that you can find, including the two versions of Census Business Builder. The one that we'll be using today is what's called the Regional Analyst Edition. You'll notice that this is version 2.5. In August, we'll have version 2.6 coming out that will have some new and different features. And then down here are some resources that you can use. One, you can click on, this is a one-page version that will show you what this particular tool is all about. These one-pagers are printable. You can take them with you. You can share them with colleagues or friends. and it just gives someone a very quick overview of how to use the tool and what the tool is about. So we're going to go back up here, and we're going to launch into Census Business Builder, the Regional Analyst Edition. Now, the first thing you're going to see here is what we call the splash page, and it's where you begin to define your region. You start by looking at the type of geography that you want to. You can start your region at the state level, at the county level, the city or town level, or the zip code level. We're going to start at the county, and we're going to use a local county here to the D.C. area, Fairfax County, Virginia. The map is going to open, and you're going to notice that Fairfax County is highlighted here, as well as a quick splash page that'll give you 5 quick variables of the almost 170 variables that are in the tool. I will say now that these variables can all be changed to reflect any of the 5 variables that you think are most important. This is the main variable, it's total population. That can be changed as well. And these colors over here in the map legend are all these colors and the legend are related to this main variable right here. So just to make it a little bit easier to build this or to see the region, we're just going to zoom out one level here. So now we see a number of these other counties that are surrounding Fairfax County. When you go to build your region, the first thing you're going to do is edit the region. And then you go and you click on a county that you want to add to your region. So let's say for whatever reason we had these 3 counties that we wanted to look at because some emergency event was either impacted them or was going to. So we're going to add Loudoun County, Virginia to the region. We're going to go ahead and add Montgomery County, and it'll pop up here in just a second. Montgomery County, Maryland to the region. Crossing state boundaries does not present a problem with the tool. And then we're going to go and we're going to add this county. Well, we'll add Washington, D.C. And we're going to add Washington, D.C. So this is the region that we wanted to add. And now we're going to go over here and we're going to name the region. We'll just call it D.C. Metro Region 1. Once you're done, you just click Done Editing, and what that essentially does is it freezes your region in place, and you can see here all the counties that you were using for your region. It depends on the version of Internet Explorer or Firefox or Chrome. It depends on how big you can make your region. We recommend using Firefox or Chrome. We've been able to build very large regions of dozens of counties. However, Internet Explorer will restrict the number of characters that you will see in the URL here, and so it can limit the number of regions. So we recommend Firefox or Chrome if you have a very large region that you want to build. So what you're going to see here are some of the features of the map. You can zoom in and zoom out, of course. You can simply pan the map just like you would any other map, and it's going to say it's retrieving data because all of this is connected to the API here at Census, and so every time that you do something different, it's going back to the API, it's pulling the data, and then it's also doing all the math in the background for the different variable and data variables that you see. Now you'll notice here state and county, and then you'll notice that city and town, zip code, and tract are grayed out. They're grayed out because if you were to switch to city or town, zip code, or tract, there's too much geography in this entire map that the response would be incredibly slow. So what this is telling you, if you want to go to city or town, zip code, or tract, you need to zoom in further. So as you'll notice, as we start to zoom in, now we just zoomed in one level and city and town and zip code came back. If you wanted to go down to the census tract level, you're going to have to zoom in even further. And as soon as you zoom in far enough, then census tract would no longer be grayed out. You'll also notice that as I put my cursor over different parts of the tool, you'll see what we call tooltips that'll come up. So if you're not sure what the definition of something is, you can put your cursor over top and it will give you a definition that we've built into the tool. So that's kind of helpful. You don't have to always go back to some glossary or anything like that. So now I want to show you all the rich data that we have in the tool. And this is a tool that's combining demographic data and business data, or economic data here at Census, as well as some data from some third-party sources, including another government agency, the Department of Agriculture, and some consumer spending data from a private entity. Here we're seeing, and as Amanda talked about before, these are demographic, socioeconomic, and housing characteristics that are all coming from the American Community Survey. In this particular case, it's coming from the American Community Survey 5-year data. And we do the 5-year data because it allows us to include some smaller levels of geography that the 1-year data does not allow for. So you see some of the data that we have here under consumers and residents. And then I'll show you what socioeconomic characteristics we have in the tool. Housing characteristics. Now I will mention that you may be thinking, boy, there's some other data that the ACS has that would be useful in this tool, vehicles at home being one of them. This tool is what I would say being repurposed for emergency management purposes. It was originally built for chambers of commerce, economic development councils, regional development councils, those entities that were concerned or wanted to see the data when they could build a region of their own choosing. It was not originally built for the emergency management community, but in doing a demo for them, they found that they were able to use large parts of this tool. Here we have our business data. A lot of people don't realize that the Census Bureau is one of the largest providers of business data. We have an economic census, which we are just about to start the data dissemination portion of. The economic census happens every 5 years. And we have 5 or 6 data variables from a number of different tools, and we're always adding more surveys and programs here. So this is employers. So you'll see a number employer establishments, total employment, annual payroll. You see revenue is grayed out, and it's grayed out because at the sector that we're looking at, which is over here, we're looking at all sectors, and we do not provide revenue data for all sectors or NAICS sector 00. And while I'm over here, I'll just show you the 2-digit NAICS that we have in the tool if you wanted to look at data associated with just one particular sector. We have workforce data from our LEHD program here. We have consumer spending data that we have purchased from a private company. And then you have the ability to add in and overlay your own variables if you so chose. And then you have the ability to filter on the tool. But before I show you the filter, I want to go back to the dashboard. This star means if I click on that, it's now going to change the variable that was there over here to the main map variable. Or if I were to click on this pencil, it's going to open up this large menu of other variables where you could go in and you could then add in that particular variable if you wanted to see it. So here I'm just going to pick a variable of non-employers. That's always very important in looking at the economic impact because non-employers are your independent contractors, and if you're not measuring them, you're missing a significant portion. So for example, in the District of Columbia, you have 23,000 employer establishments, but you have 59,000 non-employers. So that's a significant part of the economy, and it's something you always need to look at when you're looking at the economic impact of something. Now I want to go and show you how to filter. So you can take any of the variables that I just showed you, and you can filter on that variable. So let's say for emergency management purposes, I wanted to know a percent of the elderly that were in here. Or in this case, let's do poverty first. So percent poverty. So I select that variable. And then what it's telling me is that in the entire map, not just your region that you're looking at on the screen, you have a low of 2.9% in poverty and a high of 17.4%. So we can slide this along here, and let's say we want to see where there are higher levels of poverty, and then we apply the filter. And what you see is all these areas that are grayed out, they don't fit the criteria of the filter that you just selected. And here it's saying percent in poverty from 7.3 to 17.4. And then what you can do is you could go and you could add another filter. And I'm not going to demonstrate that now, but you can add up to, you can have 7 variables filtered simultaneously. So that gives people a real flavor. And again, we could drill down further and look at this same filter at the zip code level, and if we zoomed in a little further, we could look at this same filter on the track level, and again, you can do 7 filters. The next thing I want to show you is if you wanted to change your geography for some reason, you can go here, you can change your geography. You don't have to go back out and start all over again in the tool. If you decided that one of these should be subtracted from your region for whatever reason, just click on the Edit Region button again, and you're going to hit a minus, and then it's going to ask you, do you really want to delete that with a trash can? And you can say yes, and that would delete that. And then ultimately what you want is you want to see all the underlying data. So I'm going to show you 2 reports. The first one is just the city report for the District of Columbia. And again, these reports are live attached to the API, meaning that every time you click on the report, it's going to the API and it's retrieving the data and it's building your report. And then you'll see here all the data that we have here. Now I'm just going to toggle back to this screen quickly just to say that no matter how you set up this part, your dashboard, whatever your main variable is, whatever you've been looking at on the map, the great thing about the report is that we are giving you all the data. So you don't have to worry about that you did something that's going to exclude some data variable. So these are the demographic characteristics, the socioeconomic characteristics, the housing characteristics, and then the business data that we have for that area. So here you see again, that employer establishments, total employment of employers, annual payroll. We don't give you revenue because we're at 0 in NAICS, but if you went back and changed it to a specific sector, we would give you that data. We have created some key ratios for you if you found those of interest. We have some business ownership statistics from minority-owned, white-owned, black-owned, American Indian, Alaska Native, Asian. We also have veteran-owned in here as well, and Hispanic, also female and male. And then the last variables we show you are the consumer spending variables. And you will also see links up here. If you're concerned about the MOEs, or margins of error, you can turn those on. They come turned off. And when I scroll back down here, you'll see that the margins of error, where applicable, have been added in. and if you don't want those, you can go ahead and turn them off. You can download this report here in these following file formats. And then there's a few other tips and tricks that I really don't have the time to go into now, but happy for anyone to reach out to me on the email provided, and we're more than happy to provide demos or more comprehensive webinars that will show you the dozens and dozens of features and things that you can do with this very dynamic tool. One thing I want to show you is up here in the URL, everything that I've done on the map has been bookmarked. So if you go and bookmark this, just copy and paste it, then you can send it to yourself. So if you didn't want to recreate this, but you had to shut down your computer, you just go and you click on the link, and it's going to bring you right back to where you are now, or you can share it with a friend or a colleague. The last thing that I'd like to show you is where the EPRT has provided a great deal of data for you to look at. So for example, if there were an upcoming hurricane that were days away from impacting the region that I just built, what we would do with those reports and those maps is we would put them here on census.gov. If it's an imminent, really large event that we know is coming, or what they call a notice event, we're going to put something right here on the census.gov homepage. It's a smaller event. It's going to be in our emergency preparedness page. So what you do is you can browse by topic. Right down here is the emergency preparedness, and you can go to the emergency preparedness page. We did something on the Alaska earthquake that happened last year. You can see the link to the on the map for emergency management tool. You can come down here and see some of the Midwest floods that we recently did, the Camp Fire and the Woolsey Fire in California from last year, and you can also click on here and view all events, and you'll see all the hurricanes and things that we've done in the past. So we had, again, 2018 was a very busy year for hurricanes, just like 2017. So we did Typhoon U2, Hurricane Michael, Tropical Storm Olivia, Florence, and Lane. And then in 2017, which was a really big year for hurricanes, you can go back and look at all the data that we compiled associated with that. So with that, concludes my part of the presentation. And I will turn it back to Linda.
Thank you, Amanda and Chip, for presenting our audience with different ways to use Census Bureau's data to help in the recovery for when disaster strikes. So let's sum up some of the ways you can use the information you've seen today. Today, our presenters provided information on the American Community Survey and demonstrated on the map and Census Business Builder tools. From the American Community Survey, you are able to obtain population and housing characteristics. And as you have seen in the demonstrations, both tools are helpful in the recovery process. The primary difference between the two tools is that geography for on the map contains areas declared as emergency, whereas when you use the Census Business Builder, you can pick your own geography. With that being said, now that you've seen how you can use our data for emergency management, an important part of providing gold standard data is response promotion. If you or anyone you know receive our survey, your response matters. So please encourage people you know to participate. Before we begin the Q&A, here's a look into what's coming next month. Fourth in the series is a webinar on healthcare, scheduled for July 25th at 2 p.m. To learn more about this upcoming webinar, please visit the link provided here. Thank you everyone for taking the time out of your busy day today to attend this webinar. At this time, we would like to open up our phone lines and take any questions you may have about our data on managing disasters. In addition to our speakers, we have additional subject matter experts here in the room to help assist with questions. So you may hear additional speakers on the line. If you have questions regarding the 2020 decennial, please contact the telephone number provided on this slide. Operator, do we have any questions at this time?
Yes, we will now begin the question and answer session. To ask a question, please press star followed by 1. Please ensure that your phone is unmuted and record your name clearly when prompted. Again, that is star followed by 1 to ask a question. To withdraw your request, please press star 2. One moment, please, while we wait for questions to come in.
So while we're waiting for questions, oh, go ahead.
We do have our first question over the phone coming from Tara Grant. Your line is now open.
Hi, Tara.
Oh, hi, how are you? I know that I just see me as an attendee, so I'm just can I just give some commentary feedback real quick?
Sure.
So, looking at the events over the years, 9/11, 2001, national coverage, surprise to all, events in two locations, investigation was long, SIA recommendations took over a year, and some of them long to implement, and now ongoing with the 737 because the U.S. is, leading in the aviation industry. So that's a big thing for the U.S. And then Katrina, I think it was 2008, also national coverage. And then, shortly after that, that's when stuff came out, 5 Days in Memorial, and Spike Lee did When the Levee Broke, a Requiem, and 4 Acts. So that stuff started getting more and more mainstream, if that's the correct word to use. And then, recently, say stuff in, Tuscaloosa, tornadoes, the EF4, 7 years ago, 62 people get killed. And, now there were 4 or 5 tornadoes in the last month, and I just am finding that my territory was Louisiana, so I live in New York, my territory was Louisiana, my kids go to school in Alabama, so I picked those 3. And the tornadoes, I just find that, or anything, hurricanes, the older people remember the big one, and they remember, and they prepare, and they're ready. And with younger people, they just see everything worldwide happening, boop, 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 and it becomes almost like Peter and the Wolf, if I could say that. And so there were 3 tornadoes. They went to the shelter. Nothing happened. The 4th tornado, it's a Friday, Saturday night. It's party night. Nobody wants to go to the shelter. So I watched James Spann because he's local down there. And, if he has a suit on, everything's okay. If his shirt's on, it's caution. If his sleeves are rolled up, you better, emergency response better be on call. So I just kind of see that kind of stuff, and I don't know how that works into your data, and I just wanted to make that commentary in case that helps you at all.
I would say that one, we don't sort of do anything in a vacuum. So we are working very closely with FEMA and other federal agencies on a number of different federal working groups where sometimes weekly, sometimes multiple times a week, depending, and definitely monthly, we are in a room talking about a lot of the things, talking about awareness, how to keep awareness keen and in the front of everybody's mind. Here at Census, we just produced something in the last week because it was the start of hurricane season, which started June 1. Right. So we try and keep it as best we can in the forefront, and we work very closely with dozens of other federal agencies in that regard.
I guess it's just, do you find the information stream with so many channels of information, and again, I'm just saying for younger, I'm kind of in the middle, there's the older, and then there's my kids' age. I'm just wondering, what's the best way? I mean, obviously they have social media, but how do they really think of the seriousness of this stuff, and how do they, do they have a bug-out bag in the back of their car? I mean, stuff like that. Just I'm interested in it overall because I lived through those several events, and there's different things you do for the different events in different locations, obviously. Just trying to figure out, I just have area of interest for myself, which is why I tuned in to you guys today.
Right. We try and cross-promote as much as we can. So, for example, if you go on the topics page of census.gov, we have an emergency preparedness page On that page, we place a lot of data on areas that have been severely impacted by a particular event. But if you scroll to the bottom of that page, you'll see links to FEMA and ready.gov and other places where you can go to get the information you need to either provide it to someone else or the things that you need to try and stay safe yourself.
Okay.
Thank you for your question.
Okay, thank you.
Our next question comes from Valerie Coletti. Your line is now open.
Good morning, and I found this very interesting. I'm working with the American Community Survey for grant requests and things, and I'm a regional disaster coordinator for the Paradise area. And one of my questions is how often is this information in the Census Business Builder updated? And I'm asking because 6 months ago there could have been 2,000 businesses, and today there might be 20. So what's the potential for updating?
It's updated annually.
Okay.
So for example, for the ACS data, that's the 5-year average.
Okay.
Typically that comes out in December of a given calendar year. It may have changed a little bit now, and that's when we try and update it as soon as it gets publicly released.
Okay, great.
And then we update our business data when new business data from a particular survey becomes available. Then we go ahead and we update the business data.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Now, sometimes you'll see something if it's an econ census. It's going to show you the last econ census data variable, but we're in the middle of soon releasing the 2017 econ census data, and then that will begin to get updated. That's released on a flow basis. So once that starts to be available, we'll update some of the business data. But we have a lot of different data sets in there. So the worst you're ever going to see is we are doing updates annually.
Okay, perfect.
If there's something to actually update, yes.
Also, one more thing, if you're looking at the population for Paradise specifically, you'll be most interested in the 5-year data. Since I did mention earlier that that's where you're going to find the estimates for geographies with populations 65,000 and under.
Yeah, because it's interesting because I respect what everybody is going through with all of these different disasters, and I'm just kind of new to this. So my thought was, Paradise had 29,000, and now there's virtually no one up there. So we have to kind of rely on what we know locally here, and it's going to change. It's going to continually change. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Feel free to reach out to me on my contact info in there, the george.o.walker@census.gov. I co-lead the Emergency Preparedness and Response Team, and I know we've been working with Paradise, so we can talk more specifically offline.
Oh, that would be wonderful. I'd really appreciate that.
Our next question comes from Robert Cushman. Your line is now open.
Yes, hello. Thank you for the presentation. I found it very informative. I work with the City of Durham in North Carolina, and my question is there are two. One is, can you import a polygon that you have from your own workflow into this to define your disaster area, or do you have to zoom in and choose the tracks or the zip codes that most closely approximate what you're interested in?
So you can import into Census Business Builder, but you can't save it.
Okay. But you can export the results of your analysis.
Yeah, you'd have to. You're going to have to create. It's going to overlay your data on top of the census data, but we've yet to incorporate a feature where it allows you to save it. So the short answer is yes, but again, I'm happy to work with you to look at what other ways we may have for you to get at the data if that's not sufficient enough for you.
Very good.
And I'm the George Walker that's in the contact information right now.
Thank you, George. The second question is whether or not we can identify what the currency of the different data layers is within the application. You said you're using your most current
You can.
data.
You can. if you look in numerous parts, you'll see, so for example, there's tooltips that if you put your cursor over a particular data variable, it'll give you a tooltip about that data variable. And then in the report, there are links not only to the ACS and the methodology, but all the other source data that's in there. And you'll see, we kind of got a little sidetracked off of the PowerPoint, but we have, on the econ side, we always want to make people aware that we have sampling and non-sampling error, and we use that when we turn the MOEs on, so you can always turn the MOEs on if that's a concern to you.
Yes.
If it's something that's really bad, it's going to be an NA, and you're not going to be able to access it, but you can see what the errors are.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I keep having this thought, and it keeps disappearing when it's nighttime to speak to it. Is there a way to let people know that there has been a disaster that may have changed the results since then? If we aren't monitoring this all the time, I imagine, much like the Paradise questionnaires, could you flag areas that you might alert people that are using this? Oh, this data is likely out of date since it doesn't include impacts of this or that flood or this or that hurricane.
So Chip might be able to answer what that might be in Census Business Builder itself, but you can also look at the technical documentation for the data sources itself. For example, for the American Community Survey, that would be reflected in for the one-year data since they're released the year after the calendar year period of collection. It will affect, if there is something like that, it would in theory affect the data collection period for the data that's released the next year. So when the data is released next year, the year after it happens, if it did affect the data collection in some way, there will be, specific to our program, there would be a user note or a errata note on our website that would give you that information to show how it was affected.
Very good. I saw how long it took to display some of the higher resolution geography data. Is that because the processing is being done on the server, or is it a function of the client machine?
So that's pretty much right now. It's Chip can explain it better.
So at least in Census Business Builder, and I think on the data.gov,
yeah,
it's accessing the API here at Census, which has all the data stored on it. And depending on the amount of data that you're trying to pull, that can get you some lag time. We're also in the process of working on our APIs, so we hope that the performance will improve in the very near future.
Are you likely to encounter problems when there is a big disaster and everybody's trying to access the same data from the same venue? Is there a way to let people download the data so that they're not hitting your server as much?
Right. So typically what we do is if it's a major disaster, we will go ahead and run the reports for those geographies most affected. In some cases, it may be both public assistance and individual assistance that FEMA declares, and then we will post that on census.gov. If it's something like a hurricane, as soon as you log on to census.gov, when we have the data there, you'll see it on the front page. If you want to go back and look for it, it'll be on the emergency preparedness page, which you can find under topics at census.gov. You'll see things under there from most of the events from last year, Florence and Michael. We've done some of the floods. We're still sort of catching up on the floods. Sometimes someone mentioned tornadoes earlier. Tornadoes is something that we find challenging to provide data on. One, because on the business side of the house, the geographies are typically smaller geographies that a tornado impacts, and then we have very very tight disclosure rules. And so a lot of times on a very small geography, we can't report the number of businesses or the number of revenue or things like that. So it just depends. You're always going to get more granularity on the demographic side because you can drill down to track. You're not going to find any business data at the track level because there's so few businesses at that level compared to population. City, town, and is really where you start. Once you go below city, town, you lose a lot of the business data. Sometimes we can give you an establishment count. There are this number of businesses at the zip code level, but not a whole lot beyond that. So for business data, we're much better at the city, town, or county level. And I wanted to make something clear that you sort of mentioned. I just want to. So when there is a disaster, Census doesn't go in the field and all of a sudden do a population count or a business count or something like that. All of that data, it's on a schedule, and it happens when it happens, and then it has to be quality checked, and then it gets reported out, and then it gets published. But I just want to be clear that if there's a disaster tomorrow in some area, we don't send people in the field to redo the numbers. We provide the numbers from the last time that particular survey happened to be in the field in that particular area.
So you wouldn't there'd be a lag effect. You wouldn't be able to see, how it might have affected an area until the subsequent years. And again, as I said, in the subsequent data releases, and as I said earlier, we would let you know via our documentation whether the event affected the data collection in any way.
Occasionally we'll be contacted by a jurisdiction that'll want something special done, but those are sort of one-off special considerations that go through another process here at Census and so forth.
Our next question comes from Alan Irish. Your line is now open.
Yeah, good afternoon, and thanks for the seminar. Very interesting, or the webinar, I guess. I was in a discussion this morning about construction employment, and one of the participants was talking about whether something going on in one of the markets reflected emergency workers, and actually specifically cited sandbag fillers as maybe impacting those construction employment numbers. And I was curious, my interest was piqued in your webinar, is whether there would be any way to determine that sort of temporary labor force impact from your numbers, or maybe this would be something more in BLS's court in terms of the contingency workforce or short-term jobs dealing with rebuilding and cleaning up and so forth.
That's a really good question, and I can't give you an answer right away, but I can reach out to other areas here to see what the different ways that we measure construction employment. If someone's like a sandbag filler, a lot of those are people that are just volunteering. Some people are probably working for a firm that maybe they got hired or something like that, and how they would be counted at that firm may not be something that fits into the title sandbag filler. But we can get you a lot more information on the type of granularity that we can provide on those types of things. Yeah. And some of those things are temporary, meaning people don't necessarily even live where they're being deployed to assist. So I think there's a lot of nuances there.
Right. No, it's an interesting area, and I suspect a lot of our very essentially day laborers, or people who may not even be necessarily on somebody's payroll, but it did come up this discussion this morning, and your webinar made me think that perhaps there is some data that you had that would be useful.
I would definitely reach out. You can reach out to Chip, or you can reach out to census.askdata.com, census.askdata@census.gov, and we should be able to get you, toward the right direction of finding that out, because something temporary like that probably would be more of like a quarterly survey. And yeah, you might be right. It might be something. It might be something available with the BLS, and we do a lot of reimbursables for BLS, so that might be something to look into.
So what was the address again?
Sorry, it's on the screen right now if you have that up. It's census.askdata@census.gov.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Our next question comes from Don Liebert. Your line is now open.
Yeah, I was wanting to find out how well known is this these apps known for state and city government for their use?
So, I mean, that's partially what what the webinar is for. We try to get this out to the public. We go to events. We were just at the National Hurricane Conference last month. We go to like the National League of Cities. We go to county associations, government associations, and we do promote these tools at these conferences. And we do try to have a sophisticated outreach program to promote these. So.
And I would add, we will never turn down assistance when it comes to outreach.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So we're always looking for that. Yeah. So we try to do conferences. We try to do webinars. We will also do webinars that will assist. Yeah, we have state data centers. There's lots of different ways that that we can provide outreach. But yeah, we can also provide webinar assistance where we can go into. This really wasn't a training. This was more, we have these tools available. Here's a few of the things that the tools can do. But you will find training materials on each of the websites. And then you can reach out to us if you're having any problems. There's one-pagers that you can share with people. There are videos. We just launched Census Academy. And so there's a number of different ways where we can show you, get you an actual pre-recorded webinar so that you can watch it again. That's more of a training webinar as opposed to a demonstration webinar.
And specifically for the ACS, we just released a handbook that is specifically for state and local governments, showing them how they can use the ACS for their needs. We also have a team of data dissemination specialists who can go in and do specialized trainings on request, and that's something you can reach out through our office, aco.users.support@census.gov, and we can put you in contact with those training opportunities.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Our next question comes from Alan Shweti. Your line is now open.
Yes, hi. First, I want to thank you for a terrific presentation, and the tools look very exciting. What I'd like to do is go back to discussing about overlay maps and about the hurricane and coastal issues. What kind of overlay maps do you have? Do you have inundation maps? Do you have evacuation zone maps that we could view? Also flood insurance, where the population does or does not have flood insurance?
So the ones that you mentioned, we do not have those maps pre-prepared in the tool. However, it's something that we could take under consideration as long as we have a quality data source for the data. There's nothing wrong with us building a library to where people could go in and find it. So yeah, I'd be very interested in looking more into some of those things that you're talking about. You can feel free to shoot me an email, and we can talk in a little more detail.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, there's also a send feedback button on Census Business Builder as well, and you can send feedback there.
Our next question comes from Anna Lane. Your line is now open.
Hi there. I think one of my questions was answered, but I would like to confirm. By the way, I want to thank you not only for the webinar, but also the tool is very user-friendly. I mean, what we used to have to go through to even get a map or get data in a visualization tool was just so arduous, and this is fabulous. Working with emergencies in the Red Cross, the level of impact varies so quickly. And a case in point is Guerneville. When that flooded, I went out there 4 days later, and the floods had already the water has already gone down, but 4 days earlier it was 9 feet high. So if your data is a year old, how useful is it for emergency management at the time, in real time?
So I think, like we kind of talked about earlier, I think part of the value is in, the planning and the response in looking at the vulnerable populations that exist. So you know where to concentrate and prioritize those response efforts. If you need to offer evacuation assistance, or if you need to figure out where to, concentrate efforts on the housing stock and see where some of the worst damage might be. Just seeing, aggregating this data in the affected area to start to be able to see where you need to start these efforts and where you need to plan these efforts. And in terms of after the event, these data, once they're released a year later, can be helpful, like I mentioned earlier, in recovery efforts for grant applications for continued relief. But yeah, I really think identifying the vulnerable populations and prioritizing what might have been affected is really where the value lies.
And really, depending on what your goal is to use the data, we've sort of found that people have said that, yeah, even though this data I'm looking at now may be from 2018, it's better than any other data source that I have available to me, and it provides enough that it's usable.
And much of the value also comes from what I mentioned earlier, is that at the levels of geography we offer, you can aggregate those, like you've seen, to sort of build your own area and see the profile of that area.
Our next question comes from Leah Manning. Your line is now open.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I just wondered, is there any way to export the maps into for a GIS use as shape files or anything like that?
You can download from the map, but I think in the method that you're referring to,
you would have to do it through the data, the tables, or?
Yeah.
We do have something you might be interested in, and if you, for the ACS, if you want to, reach out to our user support email, we can direct you there. But we do have, we do have shape files for GIS software that are preloaded with the ACS socioeconomic data. So that's something, they're called the geodatabase files, and that's something we could direct you to.
Yes, I'm familiar with those, but I just wondered, when you're creating all these wonderful reports and everything, if there would be some way to also export the maps to go along with that.
So we are under our agile development for Census Business Builder. So we are constantly making changes both in the data and the functionality. So a lot of these comments are things that we can take under consideration for doing in the next release.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure.
At this time, I do show there are no further questions in the queue.
Okay, we'd like to thank everybody.
Thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar. And if you have any additional questions, please feel free to contact us at the information provided on this slide. Thanks again.
This does conclude today's conference. You may disconnect at this time. Thank you. Speakers, please stand by.